Welcome to the Phoenix Rising podcast, journeys of descending into the mysteries and rising from the roots. I am your host, Lisa Hillier, spiritual mentor and priestess. I have guided hundreds of women through my one-to-one mentorship, online courses, and Patreon portal into the mysteries within them to rise rooted into their sovereign selves. And today I have Chloe Elgar on the show with me. And Chloe is a truth teller and a seer. She is known as a rune witch. Her work is held and led by the guidance and magic of the runes and ancestral wisdom. Behind her big eyes, welcoming smile, and an open heart lives unmistakable wisdom, cutthroat truth, and raw intensity. She will not just tell you what you want to hear. Her work is rooted in cultivating a different relationship with darkness and intuition. The tapestry of her life weaves in different spiritual aspects of the East and the West, thanks to a unique childhood growing up in Malaysia. A fierce believer in magic and ally to Mother Earth, Chloe surrounds herself with the wisdom and teachings of nature and her ancestors. Working with Chloe invites you to walk in the dark and to stop hiding from life. Chloe is the author of the psychic memoir Revealed by Darkness, and she is also the creator of the mystical online shop Nightwing Goods, where she sells many of her magical goods and creations. And this is such a powerful episode in the portal of Samhain as a deep dive into death, the medicine of the death and the teachings of the darkness. Can't wait to sink in with you on this high holy day. Welcome to another episode on the Phoenix Rising podcast. And I am here with Chloe in the magic of Samhain. The portal, yes. The veils are thin. So I'm excited to see what magic weaves with this conversation. So welcome, Chloe. And to start, we're going to start with the big question of what has been the journey that has led you to the work that you're offering today?
Such a big question. It's like I read that in your mail and I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, that question. Thank you, Lisa. It's really nice to connect with you, a fellow Canadian. Yeah. So I mean, it's interesting because I was saying to you, Lisa, I haven't done any sort of interviews in a while. So I haven't really been like thinking about my story for a while because I've just been where I am. And so I was just thinking this morning, like, okay, gosh, how did I get to where I am? Because I think when I wrote my psychic memoir, Revealed by Darkness, and it came out last year, it's almost like I sort of like closed the book of the past, or the story of the past, because it's so windy and complex. But in a nutshell, I was a really sensitive, deeply intuitive little girl, grew up in a family that had a lot of chaos and conflict, especially between my parents. They're like complete opposites. My mom's like this deeply magical, artistic, creative woman, and my dad is this very sort of business, like harsh, very charismatic, but not really connected man. And so the two of them together was like a lot of chaos. And our family are from England, but we moved to Calgary when I was born. And so that was like a big jolt in my family life and my mom's life, to leave family in the middle of winter and arrive in Calgary, which you know what that's like. And then when I was 4, we moved again to Malaysia. My dad works in the oil and gas industry. So it was a lot of like big jolts and big change, and in our family dynamic. And I was just this like little bound of like a really big energy, very in a small package, but lots of joy and lots of like excitement, but deeply sensitive. And so there was not a lot of grounding in my childhood, and there wasn't really anyone that knew what to do with me. Like it was sort of like this like volcano, because like I was like a volcano, because it was like at any point I would erupt because of all the energy that I was consuming, but I was also like really happy, but then crying, it was like all the emotions at once. And so that sort of became a really painful, it turned into pain, right? Because it was like everything I was experiencing and feeling and picking up on and seeing was never able to be expressed or held, because no one really knew what to do with me, because I was sort of like the truth teller in the family, and there was a lot of hidden things and stuff that wasn't being looked at, and deception. So I had to ultimately shut everything down. And so I developed eating disorders at a young age, and had a whole journey with my body, and rejecting my body, and rejecting myself, and rejecting my gifts and what I felt. And that sort of became like suicidal tendencies and depression, and just a lot of chaos, like a lot of running away, a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. And it eventually took me to a place where I met a woman who, for the first time in my life, I felt like she could hold me in a way that no one else could. Like, because I was so intuitive and so sensitive, I could sense when someone had so much going on that there was no way they could hold me. So I would, go to counselors and therapists and guidance people or elders that would come through my parents, and I would just be like, no, I'm not talking to you, because I know you can't hold this. So I met this woman in Vancouver. Her name's Dr. Divi, and she at the time was working as a general practitioner, but she was just starting to do intuitive work. And so there was just this immediate knowing that this woman is going to like help me change. And so I started doing work with her, spread out over time, moved around and what have you, but she was sort of like the center point of my healing. And so through her, it just like blasted open intuition and healing my body and connecting to something beyond the physical. And that was about like 10, 12 years ago. And so through that journey, it's just kind of catapulted into like mediumship, my mediumship gifts opening up, and that taking me on a journey. And then most recently in the past like 3 to 4 years, moving to Texas, going through another big initiation with death, basically, and sort of like uncovering this deep fear but curiosity that I always had around darkness, because growing up as a kid, I would always see things and feel things and hear things like spirits and beings, especially at nighttime. I was like a huge sleepwalker. I would sleepwalk all the time. I had like crazy night terrors. Like my parents just like didn't know what to do with me at nighttime, because it was like, oh my God, like every night Chloe's coming into our room talking to people, or like it was, it was eventful for my mom. So there was always this thing about nighttime, but because of it, I was always really scared of the night. And so my feeling is that when I was ready to meet those gifts, because I think mediumship to me has such a direct relationship to nighttime, because so often spirits are more present and active in the night. And, in order to be able to see and really tap into our seeing, we have to be able to, like, it's the idea of having your eyes closed and seeing beyond what we see in front of us, right? So there was this whole deepening that the darkness held and invited for me, but required me to walk through some pretty intense initiations and facing fear. And so that introduced me to the runes, who I work with really closely now. And my feeling with the runes are that they live in the dark. They are directly related to the dark, because they're so quiet, and they're like, it's like the energy of spirit, right? It's like you're gonna feel it the loudest and strongest when you're quiet, and when it's like darker, because that's when energies are more still. So yeah, in a nutshell, it's kind of
beautiful.
where I am now.
And that has arrived you here in this moment. I love that, the initiations of death. And I think it's so powerful, because we are speaking on Samhain, which is the portal of death. And I would say, as a collective, as society, we've been very conditioned to fear death. And that was one of the greatest teachers when I was in India. I was in Varanasi, and they had the Ghats, and they're like celebrating death. And there's dead bodies moving through the alleyways. And I was like, wow, this is so not like
Normal.
at home,
Yeah.
Yeah. And they see it as a graduation, moving into a different layer of consciousness. And we go through, I think I've died like 1,000 times this past year, which I think we can all relate in some way. But it's like, do we allow those deaths to take place, or are we kind of conditioned to hold on, to grip, to not let things fall away? So with that, what comes forward, if anything, for you around the initiation of death and how it's such a teacher?
Yeah, I love that you mentioned Varanasi because so when before I moved back to Vancouver, I was living in Dubai. And Varanasi is the last chapter of my book. So I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. But we had like a weekend holiday and my husband and I were like, let's go to India. And it was like all the different places we could go to. And I was like, we need to go to Varanasi. He's like, don't you want to go to Delhi or like Mumbai or Goa? I was like, no, we're going to Varanasi, right? And it was just like similar. There was a similar feeling for me was when we arrived in Varanasi, the airport, it's so intense, but we get in our taxi and we're like driving and all of these trucks are like, going ahead of us and cutting in front of us. And they all had these like big, like covers around the back of the truck. And we asked the driver, like, because there were a bunch of people in the back of the truck, we're like, what's going on? And he's like, these are all families who are coming from in, like around India on their pilgrimage with their loved ones who are either dead or dying, and their dead bodies are in the back of the truck. And I was like, wow. Like as soon as we got there, it was like death was just like, hello, we're here, and it wasn't so foreign to me because I grew up in Malaysia. So it was, these cultures and traditions were around, but there was still there was separation and illusions. So yeah, so it was, but Varanasi, it smells, it's like it's in the air, it's everywhere, right? Which is really cool to witness. But for me, I had been experienced death through friends and family members, but the biggest initiation through death for me was through our dog Blue, who we got him when he was a puppy, and he immediately was really wild. Like they're like 8 weeks old, and this was a wild dog. And basically over time, it just sort of became more and more clear that he wasn't gonna fit into this world. And we had another dog at the time, and it was like, as he got older, he would like attack this other dog, and he attacked every dog we saw. And it just like the energy of what I felt inside of me got louder and louder and louder. And we worked with every single trainer from like Timbuktu, it's like, oh, you should connect with this trainer. They're like the best aggression trainer in Texas and Arkansas and everything. And his aggression and his wildness just got louder and louder and louder. And it got to a point where I could sense that like something else was going on here, but it was going to require me to really face my beliefs and preconceived notions around what I expect, because I've been an animal lover since I was a little girl. So I remember whenever anyone would say like, yeah, we put our dog down for, aggression or whatever, I would be like, what? Like, that's crazy. How could you do that? Really in that mindset of like, it's wrong to do that. Right. And so here I was being faced with this because it was like our family couldn't live, literally, like no one could come over. We had to separate our dogs all the time. And it was just like the energy was getting louder and louder until one night when Blue attacked my husband, and he attacked him the next morning. And then whenever he heard my husband, he went crazy. And it was like really forcing me to get super quiet because it was so traumatic and stressful, to get really quiet with myself and to ask him like, what are you trying to tell me here? Right. And what I got was like, you need to kill me. And for me, it's like, wow, this is really like, I don't know if I can do that. Right. So we ended up having to do it. And my husband couldn't even be there. So it was all me because he couldn't even be around Blue. So it was like, I had to go through this. I had to be the one to ultimately kill him. And that, it was like the biggest, most intense experience of my life, because it's like to love something so much, like your baby, and to have to make a choice that kills you, a part of you, but because the truth is more powerful, really was like kind of the energy there. And so that was like the biggest initiation for me, because it was like, again, having to face all of my fears, all of my beliefs, because, leading up to his death and even after, is like the mind is like, what if you could have done something different? What if you did something wrong? What if you found this trainer or talked to this person, or right? So it was such an intense moment, such an intense choice that like rippled out for, it's still to this day, there's so much that he continues to teach me, but it forced me to like look at the charge that I had around death, right? And it's like really something that in our society we have so much around. We create a lot of shame and judgment around death, even though it is actually, and really it is a natural process, and it's something that we all go through, right? But the biggest thing for me with death is that it's such a clarifier. Like when we experience death, it just like evaporates everything. Like anything else is just gone. It doesn't, like all of the noise, the worry, the stories, the drama, that just goes, because all of a sudden you're in the sharpness, the truth, the potency of death. And there's like, when you're in that space, you can't be anywhere else. And that was sort of the energy that I experienced with Blue, was like, if you're gonna do this work and work with the runes and hold this space and work with people around the dark and death, then can you hold that? Are you willing to sit really in this space without running away, making up stories, questioning yourself? And that was, it's like, it's hard to put into words, like the intensity of the experience. But for me in my life, like my husband always jokes that like, it's like if we were in a burning building, like I would take the animals first and then come get him, right? It's that idea that like, and the animals' nature are my greatest love. So of course I would have to like end the life of my greatest love. Like it's sort of like, of course, right? That to me is like when we are faced with our deepest fear, so that we can walk through it. It's like your podcast, like Phoenix Rising. It was like I had to burn everything away in order to sit with what was true and not get caught up in any of the stories or any of the noise that comes with something so sharp and so potent as death. If that makes sense.
Yeah. It felt like that, like clearing away the cobwebs, the clutter, the noise, and just coming into that really still space.
Totally.
Within, which, when we think about death on a micro level, the deaths that we go through in a day, even just the deaths of the stories that we tell ourselves.
Right.
In our heads are so powerful to come into that really still spot of just truth. And there's nothing else besides that potency within.
Mm-hmm.
So do you commune with Blue, like with Blue's spirit? And with that, as a medium, do you commune with other spirits, like people that have crossed, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. So Blue, and actually, so we had another dog who I had for 13 years. And he was the one that Blue also attacked. And he actually died 3 months after Blue. So right after Blue died, which is like, that's where I was like, okay, I get it, guys. I'm understanding that this is obviously a big initiation. He, 2 or 3 months after, he developed a tumor in his mouth, which literally grew like it was like by the day, like every day he would wake up and it was bigger, and it was like necrotic tissue. So it smelled like death. So it's like, I talk in my book, like one of the beings in Nordic mythology is Hela, and she's the keeper of the realm of the dead. And she is known because Angrboda, who is the mother of the three monsters, she's like the shape-shifting she-wolf of the woods. And she's the witch of the woods, and Hela is her daughter. She gives birth to Hela, but it's like in the story, it is that she gave birth to death because Hela was born with rotting legs. And it was like, when I could smell, Ollie was my dog, when I could smell him in bed, like sleeping, I could smell him. I felt like Hela was like coming to take him. And it was this like, again, like another wave, but because of what I had just gone through with Blue, it was like Blue gave me the gift of being able to walk through death. Because it's funny, it's like when we sort of got Blue, because I knew that Ollie was getting older, and I was, you know how it's like, oh, let's get another dog, so like to like ease the pain of the death of my dog. So that's sort of like the light intention, right? But of course, that's not what happened. He did ease the pain of Ollie dying, but in a way that I didn't expect. He had me walk through death in like the hardest way I could, so that when it came to Ollie's death, there was no noise around it, because, because he had cancer, the vets and the oncologists were like, you can put him, he can do radiation, chemotherapy, and it can extend his life by a couple months. And, it's like, I just looked at Ollie, and Ollie's like literally a bundle of joy, like loves to eat, like running around until the last moment of his last breath. And I was like, do you want to go to the vet every week and get shots and do this so that you can live for a couple months with me? And it's just like, no, I'm dying, and I need to die. And so because of what I went through with Blue, it was so easy. It was like, there's no question. Of course, I'm going to honor you in your death. And so Blue and Ollie, I work with both of them. Actually, I don't know if you record the video, but you can see these are those paintings up there. Yeah. Those Blue, that's Blue and Ollie. So
they look similar.
They're similar. They're both Australian Shepherds. Blue was like 90 pounds. He was huge as well. Whereas Ollie was 20 pounds. So, but yeah, so I work with them all the time, especially if I am working with someone whose animals, like I find that they will bring people to me whose animals are like at the end of their life, that need that support to, sometimes, I mean, it's like we sometimes need that person that says like, it's okay to let them go. Right. Because I think we often hold on to life so tightly that we don't allow ourselves to like surrender into the releasing. So they will often bring people to need that help. Even like literally 3 months after Blue died, someone came to me who was going through a really similar experience. And so I helped her through it. So they do that in my work, but I also, just individually, like I'm always talking to them, working with them, like they're my guardians now, right? So I really work with them. And yeah, I work with lots of specific spirits. Like I work a lot with the runes and a lot of the beings that are connected to the runes. But as a medium, yeah, it kind of depends on what it is that I'm working on, or who I'm working with, or what's present. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is a question that's come up for me a lot over the past year.
Yeah.
And so just my dad died 20 years ago. And he'll still, like, if I have sessions with psychics, he's the one that always comes forward.
Right.
And then I've been like sitting with that. I'm like, but I'm sure he's probably incarnated again into another life, because it's been so long. And so like, would I go and meet with people from previous lifetimes? Do you know what I'm kind of trying to ask here? It's like, he's maybe incarnated again, but he still comes forward in your
readings.
In readings. So how does that work?
So the way that I understand it is that spirit energy is omnipresent. So it's not connected to the physical or time. So when someone's doing a reading for you, the energy of your dad is going to be in your auric field because he is a guide for you. But his spirit he could be doing other things. Like he could be reincarnated. Even though I sort of don't feel like he is, my feeling is that he is more like in the spirit world, and I don't really feel like he has reincarnated. But yeah, so that's my feeling. And sometimes I think that in the spirit world, my feeling is that there's less rules. Like I think sometimes we get caught up in our mind. It's like our logical mind comes in and it's like, but how are you here if you're supposed to be over there? And my feeling is always like in the spirit world, those rules don't apply. Like it's a different system. It's a different it's a different realm. Right. So it's like whenever I find that we get caught up in the logics, it's just our mind trying to grasp the unknown. So these questions are always really interesting. And it's like, what I always feel like is like to ask ourselves, when we ask ourselves these questions, how do we feel? Do we feel confused? Do we feel sort of like restricted or constrained? Because that to me is like always, to me, that's saying like, you need to let go, and just like allow. And that's kind of been for me one of my gifts, because I've never been someone that's got too caught up in, like, I'm almost too far on the other side of like non-logic. That's to the point that like it can annoy people sometimes. I don't get too caught up in the details. There's like this level of trust and knowing within the energy spirit realms. But yeah, that's how it feels to me. Yeah. Does that help?
Yeah, it is like that logical part, because sometimes I get so like curious and just want to know all this stuff. And it's like, but you're never going to know. I'm never going to know, and then, so it's like, I always think of Outlander. Have you watched it? Yeah.
Yes.
Like so all these timelines happening at once and portals and, and Samhain's such a powerful one. So it's like, yeah, maybe he is in another body, but he can just come and, and maybe I go see different people. Like, who knows? It's so vast.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like, I'm known to visit people in my sleeping time. Like I'll get people be like, Chloe, were you at my place last night? I'm like, oh shit, maybe. But it's like, I'm sleeping and I'm very much sleeping, but I'm also for sure like traveling around quite a bit. So yeah, I feel like it's so important to like put the rules aside, put our structures aside when it comes to our relationship to spirit, and like be willing to ask questions. And this is also for me the deepest teachings around death is like, nothing is true and nothing is not true. So stay with the questions. If we stay in that place, then we can be with such unknown concepts as death, because we're not trying to make any of it mean anything, right? Because that's when we can get really into trouble. Like it's wrong to put your dog down for aggression, or like it's right to put your dog down for aggression. You know what I mean? It's like those two polar ways of being can be problematic because they trap us. They don't allow us to become to it's like the part of us that wants to be able to control the experience. So it's like, can you stay in the question of like, maybe, I don't know what's true, but like maybe dad is here and there right now. You know what I mean? And how does that feel if I can hold that?
It feels like that kind of ultimate surrender and letting go of control, which surrender, I think for me feels like the opposite of control, because my human mind wants to grip and control and know and grasp, but it's like, you're never going to know. So you have to surrender and just trust. Trust ultimately. Totally. In it. Yeah.
And it's a journey.
Definitely. It's like, it's death. It's letting go of the control is such a death. So the runes, can you let everybody know what are runes?
Yeah.
And how you work with them.
It's always again, it's sort of like a hard thing for me to describe. But so the runes, the way that many different people see runes differently, because again, there's some people who are really like, the runes are, were discovered by Odin and they are the gods, and they were created at this time and that's the story, right? And I was aware of the runes through my mom and through my aunt for many years, but they always felt sort of like, yeah, like they were like, oh shit, like the runes, you know what I mean? Like that was always the feeling I got. I'm like, oracle cards, tarot cards, no problem. Oh, the runes, you know what I mean? And I think that a lot of people feel that way because truthfully, like that is the energy of the runes, where they have a level of the word that that works is irreverence. Like it's like when you invite the runes to come in, it's like kind of like inviting like an elder to your house. Like, you can't reverse it. It's like, it is what it is, and they're going to be who they are, and they don't care what you think. And, it's sort of that energy, and that is the energy of the runes. So the way that I understand and have met the runes is that the symbols and signatures are really the symbols of beings. Like I see the runes as these extremely old, like ancient beings who have been around for like before the gods, before the stories, before all of this. They're like sort of the creators of realms. And so the runes that so within that realm, like there's runes that we know, but there's also runes that we have no idea about. Like they're still hiding. But rune, I believe, means a whisper, or the whisper. And that really resonates for me, because runes feel like the way that they work is they're like sort of like that energy of what I was saying, is like, to work with them, you have to be willing to be quiet. You have to be willing to be still, because their energy is not going to be like, hey, you got, like sometimes with like numbers or numerology, it's very like in your face. Like, it's like license plate, it's like 555, 666, 888, right? Like the runes aren't like that. They don't have that same like, pay attention to me, like you need to see this sort of energy. They're very like, take it or leave it. Like this is the truth, and take it or leave it. So there's like zero agenda with the runes, which I really love, because it forces you to step into your sovereignty around what you feel around it. So the runes, they're traditionally like the Elder Futhark are the 24 runes that most people know about, and these are like the ones that you'll see in a lot of like Nordic shows and magical books and what have you. And so these are like 24 beings that are known through, like, I have one here, like the symbols, right? So
That Awas?
yes.
That one was inscribed underneath this ring before she set the stone.
You know what's so funny? I pulled it because I pulled two for me. And I was like, yeah, for sure. Like for this conversation. And then last minute, I was like, you need to pull one because I pulled the two with my coyote bone. And then they were like, you need to pull another one. And I pulled it and I was like, oh, that's funny. Like, I'm not feeling that right now. And then you're like, oh, that's me. It's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
So someone inscribed it under your ring before they set the stone?
Yeah, she asked me, she's like, do you want me to inscribe a rune? And I kept on coming back to Awas as like union. That's what it felt like for me, the union of two, like the masculine and feminine,
the parts
together, the parts coming together. And it's the ring is about like deepening my connection with like trusting the masculine. And allowing that. Yeah. So it was Awas.
Beautiful. I love that. Yeah. And for me, like Awas is always also like really connects to movement and like looking at looking at how we're moving and like, because so one of my favorite teacher for the runes, her name is Ingrid Kincaid. She's incredible. She wrote 2 books. One is called The Runes Revealed, and the other one is called, I think, Taking Up the Runes. And she just teaches and offers an entirely different perspective than anyone I've seen out there, which really like resonates with the energy that I feel with the runes. And she talks about Awas as like, it has us look at, are there energies that we're attached to that are having us like move in circles? So that's interesting because it's like with union, it's like looking at what does union feel like in terms of how you move in your life, like, and you know what I mean? Like, how would that impact your movement as you? So yeah, I love that. That's so cool. I love that you have that under your ring.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Elder Futhark are the 24, and then you have there's actually 9 others that are often disregarded. So in like a full set of runes, you have 33, and that includes also the Jotun, which are seen as like the giants. But a lot of the times they're disregarded, and some of the theory is because they are more like the darker beings, but they're really like the giants who, even if you look at a lot of stories, like it's always talking about the gods, and giants are often seen as like ugly, like, stupid or like daft, or, you know what I mean? They're always kind of like put down, right? So it kind of goes hand in hand with the contrast between light and dark, how light is always seen as like the hero and like this incredible energy, and darkness is often seen as like scary, like bad, not like evil, and giants are often seen as like evil as well. So yeah, it's interesting to like pull those energies apart. But those are the runes in a nutshell. And how I work with them, I mean, it's like all encompassing for me nowadays. Like I'll work with them specifically, just like casting them or pulling them in sessions, or for myself. I always have the wheel that I work with for the year. So I cast my wheel in the beginning of the year with the runes. And so I'm always working with specifically at least 1 or 2 runes every month, or every full moon, dark moon. So they're like my teachers, my guides. But yeah, I mean, like I've got like 20 tattooed on me. Like they feel like family. They're like my deepest teachers.
Yeah. Beautiful. And so with like casting, the wheel of the year, and so you'd have like a rune that you're working with for each lunar cycle or month, or however it shows up. And how are there specific ways that you work with them? As in, I used to work with runes quite a bit. I created my own, and we did like ceremony in the woods around it. We actually cut ourselves and put it into
Oh, nice. I'm into it.
We're hardcore. Yeah,
that's
we
cool.
went really.
Yeah, you went. I mean, listen, there's so many times where I've been in ceremony when I'm like so close to just like, yeah, I feel it. But I think there's also like an ancestral connection there, right? Because it's like, because I think that even in and of itself, there's a lot in there, right? Because it's like the idea, like blood kind of brings, like blood in ceremony brings up the energy of like the devil, or like sacrifice. And so it's like, if we can pull away the judgment, the story, the fear that we put to that, it's like, because even, I mean, this is sort of like off tangent, but like looking at women's cycles and how like we bleed every month, and yet there's a lot of shame and hiding and like, judgment around that, and how often we hide the fact that we bleed every month. So I mean, I'm all about like adding blood to ceremony if it feels true for you, right? And just being with everything, it's like being intentional and being clear with what it is, what you're using it for. So yeah. But I'm into it. I love that you guys did that.
It was beautiful. It was really powerful, just the whole ceremony and working with the ruins. And how we would work with them was like drawing them on our hand or chanting their name over and over. Are there any other kind of ways that you work with the rune to invoke?
Yeah. I mean, for me, even just like paying attention to how they show up in your life. So like seeing them in shadows, or, I mean, I see them like inscribed everywhere, like literally I'm like, there's Kenna's there, but it's like, but people are like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's over there. So it's like seeing how they're showing up in your life in discrete ways. I've like sent, like sometimes in the shower, I'll like sing a song that like talks about the runes. For me, it's like getting to know each of them as beings. Like that for me is always like I think probably it's like the part of me that's really imaginative, and like it's like the psychic part that really connects to imaginary realms. So it's like the idea that it's not just moving beyond the idea that it's like, oh, Awaz means, da 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 da, or like Fehu means wealth, materialism. Okay, so where am I being materialistic? It's like moving beyond that and meeting them as beings. So it's like, okay, well, if Fehu was a being, what would Fehu sound like? What would Fehu look like? How would Fehu dress? Like, you know what I mean? Is Fehu tall or short, small, big? And it's like, what's Fehu's story? And like, for me, that's like the most powerful way to create a really personal relationship with them, because you're meeting their energies from yourself, not through the books you've read or the things you've learned about, you know what I mean? Yeah. And like anything, like this kind of what I believe around everything to do with magic is like, the more you have an emotional connection to it, the more powerful it can be, because that emotion is it's like the water.
Yeah.
So yeah,
the intention behind it,
totally,
and belief and trust in it. And what it felt like too when you're speaking to that is, it's like the tarot as well. We can read all about what each card means,
right?
But we can also experience the card on our own. We can experience the rune on our own and let it speak to us, like that whisper coming through. And leaning into that, as opposed to, well, in the book, Gabo is
so
like,
and so said that. Yeah.
It's like letting it whisper to you,
Totally.
you and experience.
And like creating with it. Like I used to love making art with the runes. So like doing like big paintings with the runes, or like even, like using wood and creating the rune, like symbols with the runes, like that. I think because also the idea that runes are not just these flat objects, like they're these three-dimensional beings. And so the more that we can interact with them in that way, the more we're like really interacting with them. Because it's kind of like if I'm like, oh, Lisa, like, cool, Lisa on Instagram, Lisa sent me an email. But it's like, now I'm like, Lisa, okay, yeah, I'm like really starting to feel you and understand you, right? And so it creates so much more of a connection.
Yeah. I love that. And I have like a dear friend that works with the runes all the time. His name's Matt. And I would get Isa in so many of the spreads that he would cast for me. And I'm like, I don't like Isa. Like, it's ice, it's a block. And he's like, it's literally in your name.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
So it's just funny how they come through and speak to you. And so I've learned to love Isa.
I love Isa. I really love Isa, because it's like when you sit with ice and it like looks like it's, like if you're just like far away, ice just looks like ice. But when you go really close, it's like you can hear it, it sings, like it's actually moving. And ice is like a preserver. So I also see Isa as like very, very wise. Like there's a deep wisdom that Isa hold. Like I see Isa as like really an elder. Like I always think of, and my father-in-law his name is Isa, and he is like, he's a wise man. So I'm always like, Isa. Powerful. I love that. That's great.
It's interesting how they come through and speak to you in different
Totally.
ways when you pay attention. It's like
exactly when you're willing,
getting quiet enough to listen. Can you speak to the wisdom of the darkness? And even like the wisdom of Samhain and the witch. I feel like they're so linked and so intertwined and working together. Yeah. Does anything come forward for you around that?
It's always, I mean, I love darkness, first of all. Like, I really love what darkness brings. And it's sort of, because it's such a big essence, like it's so hard to put into, like, to simplify. But I mean, I see darkness in a similar vein to death. Like, I feel like they work hand in hand. And the biggest thing for me is like what really sort of, like shattered the illusion is just looking at the fact that we favor light over dark. Like, we very clearly in our world, in our society, we see light as better than dark. And I think just that is very, very, very interesting. Right. So, and then like bringing that concept and that understanding into our daily life, and seeing if we can pull apart the stories, the religious conditioning, the social conditioning that imbues itself upon that, right? Because it's like we are always existing within the realm of light and dark, whether it's like day and night, right? Like literally every cycle of day, even that, like the fact that we call the 24 hours like a 24-hour day, and we sort of disregard the fact that night is involved in that, right? I talk about this like deeply in my book, but we are lying to ourselves. We've sort of shoved away darkness as this like, thing that we don't want in our life. And it's a huge it feels like it's a huge problem. And for me, facing that and deconstructing that and walking through that has been the difference between me not being in my power and being in my power. Because before, when I was still living within, and like to some degree, because I'm a human and we got a lot of conditioning and it's like always there, I'm still like sometimes like, oh my God, there it is again, like that light affinity. But when we're seeing darkness as something other than itself, we are always going to be not in our power in some way, because we're hiding from something, we're pushing something away, right? So I think that in and of itself is like the gift of darkness. It's kind of like to be able to see through all of it. And, it's even like with the concept of dark night of the soul, which I know you mentioned, that I talk about this in my book as well. I think I forget the person and all the sort of facts around this, because it's not really in my mind, in front of me anymore. But it was created through, like, the term was created through someone connected to religion, I think Catholicism, Christianity. So it connects to the belief that is related to religion, right? This idea that we go through this period of, and it's always seen as hard, like a struggle. No one talks about the dark night of the soul like it was incredible, it was such a gift, like, you know what I mean? It's always like, oh my God, my dark night of the soul like almost killed me, right? It's always put through seen through this lens of like, we don't want it. It's like you have to go through it in order to get to the other side, which is again always what we say with darkness. Like, you can't have light without darkness. Like, whenever we're talking about darkness as if it's a gift, it's always put beside light as this necessary counterpart, right? So I just think it's interesting. And just like death, when we start to go into these places and ask these questions, because of because of our conditioning and because of everything that's been layered on top of our existence, you can feel like how we get a little bit uncomfortable. Like our mind starts to be like, oh shit, what is she like a devil worshiper? Like, you know what I mean? It's like the mind starts to get like up in arms because we're defending something. And so it's always like, well, what are you defending? And how is that defense actually like locking you into like entrapping you? And that for me is like the gifts of darkness and death, is they ask you to keep going and keep disarming these guards until you get to a place where you can like be with these concepts without a charge. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that was powerful, very potent. I think as you were speaking to that and just like the dark night of the soul, I recently went through one in the past year, and when I speak to it, like it was painful and messy, and like I didn't know if I was gonna ever come out of it. And it was the most intense one I've ever experienced, which seemed crazy because I've been on this path for so long. But when you were speaking to that, like disarmoring, I think are the words. And that's kind of what this path is, where when we go into the portals of grief or heaviness or pain, they can be more intense because the armor's off, the guards are off, like the walls are down. And when you're speaking to that, I'm like, when I speak about it now, as I'm on the other side, and it was such an initiation, but it is always like, but I came out of it. Like I came back to the light.
I know.
Not like it was so beautiful.
I merged with it or something.
Yeah. And that is interesting. Because there's such medicine in those dark nights of the soul. If we can sit with it and get so uncomfortable and surrender to it. Like when it was incredibly painful was when I was resisting it and not wanting to be in it. Yeah. And the darkness, like is like two of Lagos.
Yes, which I pulled for me.
Oh, interesting. Which is like the subconscious, right?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean, it can be I always see, I mean, Lagos is the water rune, which sometimes you can see like the subconscious is like water because it's just always flowing. Like there's always more that's coming up, more moving, which connects to Awas as well. Right. Yeah.
Which is like the darkness, because until it's like the subconscious is guiding the ship, so to speak, until we bring it into our awareness. So the darkness is like, it holds a lot.
It's honestly, for me, I mean, it's the biggest thing. Like it's just, and you know, I think that I really feel, you know, what's that movie? Divergent, you know, the movie Divergent with,
never watched it.
It's like, it was kind of came out around the time of like Hunger Games and sort of I think it's also based on a book, but like this idea, or even, I don't know if you read the Sarah J. Maas books by chance. If you haven't, you're probably going to start now because they're so good. But this idea that we all have unique gifts and perceptions and understandings, and that they all add to the wholeness, and like we can't all have the same, because it's like, you know, it's like if I'm, you know, it's like the idea that when you talk to someone that you both experience the same situation, you don't have the same exact story. Like, you know, it's like, oh, but I saw like a fox run across the street. Oh, I didn't see the fox wasn't there. It's like, no, the fox was there, I saw it. It's like, but you were to my left, right? It's the idea that we're always going to perceive things a little bit differently because we're all unique. And so for me, like in my understanding and through my experience, like I feel like everyone needs to meet darkness in a way where they dismantle how complex the cobweb is of our consciousness around it, because there's so many generations of of turning away from it and making it bad. And so I feel like it's super important for everyone, but that's me, because it's like, that's what I really feel and believe. But yeah, it's just the biggest thing around darkness is just, and like to bring it into daily life is to look at, you know, how often are we demonizing the dark and making the dark bad or evil or wrong or hard or heavy or painful? Like, why do we partner pain with darkness? Do people never experience pain in the daytime? You know, like, is no one experiencing pain in the light? Like, you know what I mean? But whenever someone's experiencing pain, they're like, oh, it's a dark time. Like, do you mean literally? Was it nighttime? Or like, what do you mean it was a dark time? Right. So it's like, that's sort of, for me, the deepening of getting like, yeah, like removing a lot of what we've learned and sort of like returning back to nature and the truth of nature. Because when you're with nature, if you're sitting with an animal has zero connection to what we see light and dark as. Like, there's nothing, you know what I mean? Like, I see you're wearing serpent earrings, right? Like, people often see snakes as like bad, evil, you know, like scary, unless they're seen through like Kundalini energy or like the divine feminine, which also can be connected to that too, right? But it's like, we put so much on top of things that have a pure essence about them. And when we do that, we rob ourselves of their true teaching or their true guidance or their true essence, because we have all of our stuff around it. You know what I mean? And that to me is like the deepest teaching around darkness that darkness offers, is because darkness is like, well, what if I'm not what you think I am? And what if it's actually safer to walk alone at night than in the daytime? And what if, you know, it's like, so asking questions like that really allow us to start to look at even our relationship to magic and our relationship to our sovereignty and our connection to our ancestors. Because a lot of ancestor work, like coming back to Samhain, is done in the dark, right? So, and it's all around, it's very deeply connected to healing and the support. So it's kind of like, it also kind of feels like with darkness, like it's a neglected relationship. Like, we come to it when we need it, but then we like sort of run away from it when we don't like it. You know what I mean? And it's like,
thank God I'm out of the darkness.
Yeah. But then it's like, oh, it's Samhain, let me come back to you and like use you to feel connected to my ancestors. So yeah, I mean, you can tell, like, I could talk about darkness forever. It's why my book is called Revealed by Darkness. But yeah, the biggest thing is to be willing to ask questions and to look at, if you do have a discomfort or fear or judgment around darkness, like, just ask those questions. Be willing to see in your daily life, in mainstream media, like, how often is darkness paired with something that has a negative connotation, and why? Like, why is that?
Yeah.
So
today I received a package from my favorite witch. She owns an apothecary, Pranic Forest. She's in the Okanagan. And I had ordered some things, and Amanda sent me some gifts in there. And one is a cobra snake skin.
Ooh.
And I received it today on Samhain. I was like, oh my gosh, I just have chills now.
So I grew up with cobras because in Malaysia, we had like king cobras in our backyard. So I love cobras. Like, they feel like they remind me of home. So that's really cool. Cobras are like, yeah, you don't mess with cobras.
No. And do you have does anything come forward that you'd like to share around the medicine of the snake?
Of the snake, like in general, or of
like snake skin and the shedding of the skin?
I mean, for me, snakes, the thing that I always feel about snakes is like, you know how they don't move straight. They always move like this, right? So part of what I always get with snakes is like, you're always carving your own path. Like, it's never straight. you always have to, it's like a snake is never going to retrace any other being's path. They're always going to create, like, imagine a snake trying to, like, they would be like, oh, then they turn left and then they turn right. Like it's their own path, versus like other animals, they follow each other's tracks and it's easier to go straight. So to me, that's always a big piece around snakes. I mean, with snakes' skin, the other thing around snakes is like when they shed, they never look behind. So they're always moving. So it's this idea that if the skin has been shed, it's done. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's no longer needed. Even looking at skin being protection, like that protection is not needed anymore. So I would say, I mean, for you, I would say there's like a rawness, like that you're maybe walking with right now. Like, you know, it's like when my dog Blue died, like I was going through a death. And so I felt like I had shed a bunch of skins, and I felt like raw. Like it felt like, you know, if someone poked me like too much, I'd feel it. So yeah, I think that snakes offer a lot. Like they bring a lot forward, because they're also really hidden. Like you rarely see snakes. Like they're not really animals that we see a lot of. And I live in Texas. So, you know, they're everywhere. Like I have one that lives under our pool deck, actually. But yeah, so for me, that it's also like, look for the hidden. Don't just follow what seems obvious. Be willing to look for the things that are a little bit more hidden.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. I love that they don't go back to reclaim their skin.
You know? No, they don't. They're like, see you later.
Done with this. Does anything come forward with you on why the demonization of the darkness happened?
I have, I mean, there's a lot of different sort of feelings around it. I'm not really I hated history in school, growing up in school. Like I just really didn't, I was like almost repelled by it. Like the focus on facts and dates and stuff, like really, like I couldn't remember it. And I have a really good memory. So the fact that I couldn't remember it was like really interesting to me. So my feeling is that there was an understanding that it's like the control of power, like it's the control of, you know, power and magic, because, and it totally reminds me of the books I'm reading right now, but it's like, you know, there's a lot of illusions in the light. Like even the idea that something is when light casts upon an object, the shadow, that's when a shadow gets created, you know? So like we often, whenever people talk about darkness, especially in the spiritual space, they almost always bring up shadow work, right? But I find that interesting because it's like shadows get created when light shines on something, not darkness. There aren't really shadows and darkness unless there's light present in the dark. So to me, it's almost like the simple answer is that it was a way to control the power of the wild, you know, that is like present in all of us, whether we're animals or earth or human. So it's like that concept that we're afraid of our power, you know, because it's like, well, what happened? And that's kind of the journey that I experienced within myself. Like the more that I stripped these ideas away and like started, you know, being in the process of death. And like I walk at night, like I walk when it's dark every morning, and I prefer it. And even that, like getting to a place where I feel strong enough and present enough to walk at night and not be like, is someone gonna hurt me? Like what's gonna happen? You know, but like we're, especially women, like we're like, most people are like, Chloe, are you serious? Like you should, you know, and we live in a really gentrified area. So my friends were like, Chloe, you should like be careful. It's like, I don't feel that, because I feel that it's important for us to like reclaim that courage and that strength and that power. And I feel like that happens in darkness. So I think that's my feeling. I feel like, in a nutshell, without getting too caught up in the story and the details, is that darkness holds a power that needed to be controlled. And that includes magic. It includes witchery. It includes mysticism. It includes our understanding of other realms. It's like all of that. It's all encompassing. So.
Yeah. Beautiful form of control, and to keep us separate from our own magic.
Absolutely.
And medicine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Who is the witch for you?
What do you mean?
Archetype of the witch, or the witch that's within. It's like, when we think of the darkness being demonized, the witch has been demonized.
The main character. Yeah.
Yeah. Like my mom will jokingly be, oh, you little witch or whatever. And she just means it because I've done something, nothing to do with me stepping into my own magic and all that sense. And then I'm like, oh, but wait a minute, like it's so
in the
programmed.
Language. Yeah. And it's the same. It goes hand in hand with darkness. Well, I mean, I think that it's interesting. So because my mom was always really witchy, like it's just who she is. And she has a birthmark that goes like almost like like fully down the left side of her face. That's been a big source of insecurity. It was a huge source of insecurity and unworthiness and struggle in her life, especially she was, born in the 50s. So it's like not like her mom put makeup to cover it up. Right. So she always felt like an outsider, and she always felt different. And she's really like, she's very creative, very artistic, very magical. So I grew up with her, and like our friends always were like, your mom's really witchy. So it was always present in my my life. But like over time, because my brother, he's surrounded by us. Like my mom is an intuitive artist. I'm a psychic medium. My brother's wife is a psychic medium artist. It's like he's surrounded by us, but he's still sort of, sometimes it's like, spirits aren't real. I'm like, oh, Sam, it's really funny, but it's like, to me, that the energy of the witch is like, it's just that the part of us that wants to feel connected to our wildness, our magic. And I remember when Lisa Lister published her book, Witch, and it was like, a lot of people around me, like you can feel this like desire. And it kind of reminds me of psychic work as well, or mediumship work, where people like want permission. Like, am I a witch? Like, is it okay if, you know what I mean? It's like, how many people have been like, Chloe, am I really psychic? It's like, if you're asking me that question, like probably the answer is yes. Right. So to me, it's this part of us that wants to claim an aspect that's been hidden. And that to me is the witch. It's because it connects back to everything we've been talking about. It connects to darkness. It connects to nature. It connects to having a deep relationship with earth and understanding that, like seeing beyond the illusion and seeing beyond just what we're being shown, and having a deep, intimate relationship with the seasons and the cycles, and how we're always being shown things. Like that to me is the witch. And it's like, the more that we are willing to really claim that and really practice that, like when it's easy, when it's not easy, when it's convenient, when it's not convenient, it starts to just integrate into life, where it's like, you can't what would be the word? Like you can't refute it. It just is. It's like, my life, you were asking about synchronicities. It's like, I'm literally like all day I'm being communicated to through nature, my guides, I'm laughing. Like I was driving home from Whole Foods, just like laughing out loud to my guides, because I'm working on something right now, and they're making it so hilariously funny, like just some of the obviousness and some of the not obviousness, So like, to me, that is the archetype or the energy of the witch, is like that part of us that wants to be claimed. that feels like she might not be allowed. Like it's the part of us that feels like she's unacceptable in society. So
yeah. Beautiful. It's like that really
answer.
like being attuned to your own magic and medicine, and then also like seeing beyond the veil, like seeing the unseen. We'll say, like, I've had those experiences where I was like, you're kidding, we're asking for signs, and it's just like so blatantly obvious, and it's open to seeing with really clear eyes what's all around us. Is there a story of synchronicity that you want to share?
Yeah, sure. Well, and just kind of going with that, when before Blue died, when I was dancing in the space of like knowing it was coming, but very much like avoiding it, I literally had like, there were like 5 dirt birds that died in my yard, like all at once, kind of like one after the other. We have like huge black vultures here in Austin that I'm literally, they've sort of, they're my surrogate ravens, because we don't really have ravens here, and I love ravens. So I've like taken vultures as my new family. But we have huge ones here, and like I saw, groups of them like every day with like a dead possum, like just death was everywhere, right? It was like I couldn't get away from death. But even then I was like, oh, this is really random that like all this death is showing up. And then it was like, oh, Blue's gonna die, or Ollie's gonna die. But that's what I mean. Like it starts when you start to listen and work with the energies more and align yourself with the energies. It's like you can't question it, because it's just like, I don't have any dead birds in my yard right now, but like, anyways, the synchronicity. So a couple weeks ago, my husband was away, and you know how iPhones do those like photo memory things? So it was on a Saturday, and it did a photo memory of Blue, and he died in December of 2019, so almost exactly 2 years ago. And so I watched it, and it was really like specific photos. It was like the day we met him, the day we got him, like specific moments that I remember in his life, and then like every photo of his last few days. So it was, like really, really emotional, like watching it. And so then for the rest of the day, because my husband was away, I was like really in the space of it and didn't get pulled out of it. So I went to bed that night crying, and I was, I sort of got pulled into some of the PTSD of like, did I do the right thing? Like tracing back every moment of the last 2 weeks, and like every decision and every interaction. And I was really in a little bit of in the wound. And I asked him, I was like, did I do the right thing by you? Did I honor you? Was it what you wanted? And so I fell asleep with that energy. My husband got home like in the middle of the night. So he woke up, and he had like little gifts for me and our dog. And so we were like, let's go to our coffee shop, and you can give us our gifts. So we're walking out of the coffee shop, and like right in front of us was a blue. It was a dog that looked exactly like Blue. And we were all like frozen. It was like someone pressed pause. It was crazy. And so my dog was like frozen, and the dog that looked like Blue was frozen. And it was like, when you can like you feel like your processing like slows down. I had this moment of like, wait, what? That's Blue. Oh wait, no, that's Blue's brother. That's Watson. So Blue had a brother that I never had met before, but I had seen on Instagram. And so I was like, is that Watson? And the owners were like, oh my God, yeah. But as soon as Watson heard his name, he like came back to reality. And he also was really aggressive, and has a lot of reactivity. So he started like kind of going crazy. And so the husband like pulled him away. And I was like, can I say hi to him? And she's like, oh, he's really not good with new people. Like he's attacked other people. I was like, okay, no worries. So that happened. And I told Ferris, my husband, and showed him the thing. And I was like, I feel like Blue set this up. Like, you know, it was just like, how did this happen? But it felt incomplete. Like we didn't get to say anything. I didn't get to see Watson. So they left for like 10 minutes. And then the wife came back and she was like, can I say hi to our dog is Oreo. She's like, can I say hi to Oreo? I really want to meet him. And she's like, I'm sorry if we like upset you guys. And I was like, you know, no, this was honestly so beautiful because, and I told her about the night before. And she was like, she's like, we've never been to this cafe. We live on the other side of town, and literally last minute we were like, let's go check out that place that you've been wanting to go to. And so they came, and she's like, I 100% believe that Blue orchestrated this. And I asked her, like, how are you doing with your dog? And she's like, we are struggling. Like, it's really hard. You know, it's been 2 years. He can't go any. So it was like, it was such a beautiful moment. I got to like, it just felt like one of those moments where like life stopped and we entered a realm of healing. And it was like Blue orchestrated it for us, for me to receive the answers that I was asking him the night before. It was like, well, this is my brother and he is struggling and they are struggling, and the Watson was never as bad as Blue. Like Blue was like 10 times worse than him, but it was like, it just gave me the healing, the peace that I needed. And I was about to get a tattoo and I was going to put a wolf, and then it was like, okay, I got to put Blue. So I added Blue instead. So yeah,
beautiful.
Yeah, it was really special.
Yeah, that's special, and just receiving such medicine and healing from that.
For sure. Yeah, we both just like sat at the cafe crying for like 20 minutes after.
That's beautiful. What's been your biggest lesson along the way?
Killing Blue, like having to end his life, truly. Like everything we've said, having to make a choice that I never thought I would make, and realizing that it was the most important choice I had to make, you know. So like being willing to, you know, I mean, that in and of itself is sort of like confronting beliefs around darkness, because the idea that you shouldn't end an animal's life unless they're old is sort of in connection to our relationship to darkness, because it's like wrong and right, what's wrong and right. And I think that this is where we get we're in trouble in the world right now because of this imbalance, right? Whether it's because we keep people alive on machines beyond when they should be alive. Like, I mean, there's just such a massive imbalance because of our rejection and fear of death. And because of the relationship that I have with nature and how much I listen to and honor nature, I can see that nature is showing us like, this is a huge imbalance because we are using our minds to bypass the laws of nature. And that is a problem, because energy is energy, and that energy is going to fix itself. And so even like looking at how we talk about, like natural disasters, for instance, like we use very specific language to describe natural disasters, like catastrophic, even like sometimes with like hurricanes, like, you know, when they give them names, like evil, like, you know, Hurricane Anna or something, you know what I mean? Like it's a person. It's like, this is nature being nature, and we're villainizing it. And by doing that, how are we creating a story that is again pulling us away from what's true? And that is essentially 100% what the story with Blue was. Because when I really put my story aside, my attachment aside, my beliefs aside, and I sat with him, it was so clear that he was not happy and he didn't want to be here. It was so clear. And so that, to me, it's like in nature, you know, for instance, with wolves, which dogs are descendants of, when a wolf is like going against the pack will kill it or abandon it, right? And that's just the truth of nature. But for us, we humanize animals, and so we we'll say like, no, it doesn't deserve to die. Like we need to keep, like, take it to training and boarding, and, or drop it off at a shelter and maybe someone else can take it. And we're not courageous enough to make the decisions that nature makes all the time. And when nature does do it, we tell nature that she's evil. And that is like, I mean, to me, does that make sense? It's like, wow, for me, it's like really something that we need to look at. And that, like, I think that this connects to your work a lot, because that's the villainization of the feminine, right? Which is like connects back to nature in and of itself, because the energy of the mother, like one of the runes, Berkana, is a mother rune, and it holds the energy that the mother knows how to nurture and also kill. And so, how often are we removing that right from the energy of the mother, right? So like with animals, I know for pigs, for instance, if a mother pig gives birth to babies, but she knows that she doesn't have enough meat to nurture her babies, enough milk, she'll eat those babies so that she can then have enough sustenance for the next litter, right? And then we will look at that and be like, oh my God, that's so messed up. Like the pig is a murderer or something, but it's like, that's actually just nature. And we are a part of nature. And that's like going back to the darkness piece. When we started to separate ourselves from darkness, we started to separate ourselves from nature. And here's what's going on because of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's
to go
powerful.
Deep.
Well, and that, like, the demonization is the word that's coming to mind, of the feminine, or and it's like the feminine is chaotic and wild and all of it. Like, she's like, I'm by the ocean, and she's the constellation, but she's also like the tumultuous, fierce sea. Yeah. And we were speaking a lot earlier about control, and that's what it's like everything's been suffocated and controlled. The earth has been suffocated and controlled, and the feminine, because when that's unleashed, like that true nature, that's when we come back into balance and into harmony. Like, we have to have the chaos. Yeah. Chaos is the creator, right? In all of the origin stories, there's chaos. And with the runes, the rune Querth is the fire and ice rune, which is the rune of creation. So it's like, we want creation, but we don't want the chaos. Yeah. Right? Just like everything with us. Yeah. We want the growth, but we don't want the stress. We want the birth, but we don't want the death. Yeah. Right. I mean, yeah. It's wild. I love it. I love all of this. Interesting, like, and fascinating stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really powerful. How do you experience the mysteries? I mean, for me, the mysteries are my favorite part, because that is where we really experience like life in its most expansive, like, crystalline form. Like, if I love the mystery. I love being able to go for a walk and be like completely like, I don't know what I'm going to see today, but like, I'm open and I'm willing to see it, and like what that brings, so I think that the mystery, when you can create a relationship with mystery where you are curious about it, and I think it comes back to darkness, because if you trust yourself, and if you trust that you are your own source of safety, of love, of support, then you can have a relationship with mystery where you're curious and open to it. Because there's not this feeling of like, well, what if this comes and I can't take care of myself? Or what if I see something that I can't unsee, or something that scares me, so, which was me as a little girl. Like, that was Chloe as a little girl. She was like, holy fuck, holy fuck, holy fuck, holy fuck. And then she was like, sorry, I hope I'm allowed to swear. Yeah. And then she's like, I can't tell anyone about anything I'm seeing, because it's going to
blow, like everyone's just going to crash. So that was like the journey for me, was to be able to like come to a place and learn through people who could hold it, that I could hold it, and then go back into that realm of mystery, but with like a new sense of safety, intrinsic safety. So yeah, I love the mystery.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you root into the self?
I mean, I think that in and of itself is a journey, because we can only be as rooted as we are in the moment. Like, you know what I mean? It's kind of like with trees. I was walking around the neighborhood this morning, and some of our neighbors planted a new, I always forget the name of this tree, but they blossom these huge white magnolia tree. They're so beautiful when they're huge, but they planted a new one, and it's like, I was like, what tree is that? But then I saw the flower. I was like, oh my God, that's a baby magnolia tree. So cute. But it's like that tree can only be as rooted as the roots can hold it right now. So it's got like the stakes to keep it supported, so it's this idea that, for me, it's like understanding that as you move forward and as you continue to go on your journey, you will be more rooted, and trusting that the roots that you have right now are deep enough to hold whatever it is that's coming in your path. But in general, for me, it's like having a reverence with ancestors and understanding that you are not alone, and that you are supported, and that there are beings and forces that love you and see you and understand you. I feel like that's really important. And whether that just translates to the spirit realm, or if that requires in the physical, like I know for myself, having a small group of elders who I really trust and respect, that I can come to with like the crazy, wild things that occur in my life on a daily. And they're just like, that's so cool. Or like to be able to reflect back and not go into story or drama, has been really important for me to find that sense of safety within myself. So, but yeah, I think also doing the work. Like I love in conjure work and a lot of hoodoo and voodoo work, there's this collective knowing that nothing comes without work. And I think sometimes in our society, we now even like we make work bad. It's like, kind of like we're in a transition point where we're like trying not to work as much. So we're trying to be more like ease and manifesting, but it doesn't mean that there's still not work. and we have to work. It's just our relationships with the work maybe needs to change. So yeah, like you gotta keep showing up.
Yeah, I love that. It feels like I'll notice within myself where I'm like, oh, I've been on this path for so long. Like, when's it going to get easy?
Right.
It's not ever.
No. And
it's always the initiations.
There is none. And it's like, it feels like it goes back to the light and dark, because when you can hold both neutrally, then it's not, is it easy, is it hard? It just is like, right. You're not like comparing it to what it was or what you want it to be. You're just here.
Yeah.
So, but that in and of itself takes time to, I think, for us to unravel all of the things that have had us do that in the first place.
Yeah. A lot of unpacking with that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to add to this beautiful conversation before we close?
Oh, no, I feel I've loved it. I feel, most sense of completion.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Well, it'll be in the show notes where everybody can reach out to you and experience your magic. So thank you so much. It was like the perfect Samhain conversation.
I know. So beautiful, really. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much for joining me for an episode of the Phoenix Rising podcast. Please like, share, download, subscribe if you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next week for another episode on the Phoenix Rising podcast. Sending so much love.